And he said, I wouldn't change a thing. Really helped me to move on with my day, even. Sometimes
Mhm.
as leaders, you need to unpackage something and you need to go, go, go.
Uh-huh.
So just having that sounding board, he's available to me. He's very approachable. To your point, you've got to have that as a leader. You just have to have it.
Mhm.
And I'm blessed.
I had the opportunity to catch up with Gina Temple, president of St. Francis Hospital in Colorado Springs. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks. So, welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites. I'm so freaking blessed to be in the room with Gina Temple. So, Gina is president of St. Francis Hospital and also of St. Francis Hospital Interquest, which is a freaking new arm of relatively new that they're going to be doing some really cool things. So, I'm thrilled to be in the room with you again. And I know you have a quote to kick us off with around our topic around leadership. And so I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. And again, I'm so happy to be here with you again, Michelle. I learned so much every time that we have our interaction. So thank you for having me. And my quote is really, well, a quote from John Quincy Adams. If your actions inspire others to dream more, to learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. And today I was so excited to really pull that thread and talk about just leadership in general and those who have inspired me all along the way.
I this topic excites me, and like I said to you before I hit record, that I'm familiar with the quote and I love the quote. And I think the thing I would add too is that leadership is not a title. Leadership is who we are. In fact, it's so funny, Gina. I had a coaching call this morning before you and I jumped on to this recording, and it was one of those things that I was talking to the leader because she talked about do successful leaders have to be positive minded people? And so my question to her is, what do you consider to be successful? So because it depends, right? You can have leaders that might define success as I achieved this goal, this thing, this whatever it may be, and they leave dead bodies along the side of the road. Or if you're, so she sat there and thought, and she said, well, it's someone who achieves things and motivates people and all. I said, okay, great. So if you're someone who does that, what attributes do you have? And I think that embodies the quote that we started off with today, is that it depends what your goal is and how you define success or a leader. So I'm 100% on board. So I'm curious, who is that for you? Who has been that for you and who continues to be that for you? What are some standouts?
Well, the first standout is it's Quint Studer, and I I had the interaction with him first in 1997, whenever I was a trauma nurse at Baptist Hospital working in the emergency department. And I just remember seeing Quint, and he was such an inspiration. He was visible, he was approachable, but also the depth of his leadership just resonated. So we would have our town halls where all of the employees would go and listen to the same message. We would be given action
Hmm.
items to execute on as frontline staff, but also Quint trusted us enough to give us all of the data about the hospital. I knew how many decubitus there were. I knew what our patient satisfaction was. And when I think about Quint Studer, I wrote some notes here.
Yeah.
I think that really stood out for me. He led from the front.
Sure.
He espoused the moral character that aligned with our faith-based, not-for-profit mission.
Yeah.
And I think most importantly, he could tell us what was the vision and what was the plan to get there. No one
Yeah.
wants to get on a bus with destination unknown.
Yeah.
But he rallied an entire workforce and physician population around a vision. And again, you see what let's say we at
Yeah.
we became one of the top performing hospitals in the nation. Uh,
Yeah.
Patient perception, and later, as the organization evolved, using his plan, became one of the first federal Baldrige Award winning facilities
Wow.
in Africa. So big kudos to
Yeah.
Studer, and I just learned so much from him and continue to learn from him today.
So it's interesting. So for people who are not in the healthcare space and don't know Baldrige, Baldrige is a very high standard around like a number of key points. It is not for the faint of heart. And it does require, like you were talking about, everybody's rowing in the same direction. They're very clear on what goals are, why this stuff matters, right? Because it's not just about achieving the certification, but there's a result. The certification is a result of processes being in place, of teams working together, of information, of transparency. It's not a fear-based organization that results in congratulations, you've done all this stuff and achieved all these things, and this is what's in place. And it's not about perfection, but it's about establishing the systems to be able to have that mindset of continuing to learn and continuing to prove, and putting patients and others first. The thing that stood out for me that you talked about, Quint, because this was back in 97, when that wasn't necessarily the traditional way to lead, right? A lot of times leaders, and I still see it, they keep everything close to the chest. We can't share that with people. Why not? Right? And what happens is people are very intuitive, and they know when you're not giving them the whole story. And so when you're giving people the story, and I'm not talking about fears or anything else, because leaders still have to inspire hope, but they're willing to let their guard down and say, okay, let's do this. And I love that story, and curious. I know you as a leader, Gina. I met you after your experience with Quint. I got exposed to Quint at Sutter Health. What have you noticed? Think about your leadership style today that was informed by how Quint led.
Oh, wow. It goes back to, I think, having that experience, being a person in the room that was executing on some of these experimental tactics of aid it, um,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge, introduce, express,
Yeah,
thank you, or duration and thank you.
yeah,
And
yeah.
the key words around, before you leave the patient, is there anything else I can do for you? I have the time. I,
Mm-hmm.
what that showed me was the experimentation within healthcare. It doesn't have to be, a confidence interval study, or doesn't have to be statistically uh, proven. We need to do the anecdotal test of change that
Mm-hmm.
can be, implemented quickly if they work. And so being part of that change, and, some things worked, some things didn't, that helped me to really start to embrace change. The other thing
Mm-hmm.
that experiment did, just being part of that change initiative, really, I became so hungry for leadership,
Yeah.
education. I was like, why is this leadership team bringing out something in me as a frontline staff that I've never experienced before?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started going back to school. So, got my master's degree, uh, which Quint helped me with, and then
Yeah.
completed my PhD. And actually, Quint and I, we named his model the evidence-based leadership model at that time, so that I could reference it in my PhD work.
I love it.
So that, just the hunger to learn, that was part of my experience of working
Yeah.
with an inspirational leader like Quint. The other thing was getting involved. I actually became a federal Baldrige examiner not later,
There
because
you go.
we got to, I was one of the crew that were hosting folks and walking them through
Mhm.
whenever they were surveying the hospital. So I think those inspirational leaders, they bring out things in us that we didn't think
Mhm.
was possible. But also, I would not be the person that I am today. I would not be the leader that I am today if it had not been for that experience of working for Quint Studer.
It's interesting because when I think back, I'm sure Quint didn't step up in front of the room on the town halls, lead the way he did, because he's like, I want to make an impact on every single. I don't think that's the intention or the thought around it. But what I love is, and I know you as you are, is that your leadership style, you have an acute awareness of the impact of your actions and how you show up on people all the way to the front line. I'm not going to say down to, I almost did, and that's my bad. But through leadership to front line. And so that when you have that awareness, Gina, we tend to show up differently. We are cognizant of things at a deeper level. instead of maybe telling ourselves a story that's not going to impact them when you know that's a lie. Yeah, I love that. So who else? Quint's a powerful one. We could probably just mic drop on that one and go, okay, our job here is done.
So number 2 of 3, I wanted to highlight Jill Ragsdale. And I know we've talked about Jill in the past, an executive and just an innovator in the space of all things human resources.
Mhm,
And I had the pleasure of working for Jill whenever I was at Sutter Health. And, I wrote down some things that I appreciated about Jill. She was very goal driven. However, what I loved about Jill is she didn't create the goals in isolation. So she
mhm,
included all of the HR executives and leaders within that goal creation. The next thing that she did, once she set the goal, then she said, I trust you. She gave us
mhm,
autonomy to get to that goal how we saw fit.
mhm,
Then that trust then built confidence within her team. And so I
mhm.
grew as far as my confidence and my own leadership skill set based on working for her. And when I think about Jill, I think about Brene Brown.
Yes.
She says, to be clear is to be kind.
Mhm,
I do think that clarity with the goals and then giving leaders the autonomy
mhm,
get to that goal how best they see fit. Many times they can do a lot better than what as leaders we may have prescribed
mhm.
for them. So I just wanted to celebrate Jill and the spirit in which she leads today.
Yeah, so I got exposed to Jill because she had 2 rounds of leadership at Sutter Health. So I think she came from Mayo, came to Sutter Health. I think she went back to Mayo and then came back to Sutter Health. And at the second round is where I had the opportunity, because earlier I was in finance. The second round, the part of the organization I was in, which was leadership development, that talent management, L&D part of the org, reported up to HR. And so I got, to your point, I didn't report to her, but I have firsthand exposure to her. What I really appreciated, we would have, 450 people in the room, right? And when she was at the end of it, part of her thing is call and text me. I'm available to you if you need anything or have a question or need to call something out. And literally up on the screen in front of all these people, here's her cell number. And she had the full expectation. She wanted to share in your victories, and she wanted to be able to help remove barriers to stuff that was getting in the way. The stuff that stood out for me on what you just said is leaders tend to think, and a number of leaders who do this, when they get in that role, they have to prescribe the what, the goal, and they also have to tell people the how. And the underlying assumption we're making in that is that the people that are on our teams don't have their own thoughts or ideas, or maybe that our way is the better way, or that we put this onus on ourselves that I'm in this leadership role now, so I'm the one that has to have all the solutions, right? Which is a daunting thing to dump on ourselves. But when we do what you were talking about is, let's cascade down the what, the goal, because the goal is going to be aligned to the goals at the macro level at the top of the house. Let's cascade that down. And then the how is going to be up to the individual teams, depending on what they know to be true, how they can align it. It's powerful stuff.
You're absolutely right. And today, when I look at where I sit as a leader, to the joy that once was as far as designing organizational development structures and
Mhm,
designing dashboards and business initiatives and executing on those days, not that they're not still here, but
mhm,
today what brings me joy is actually setting the vision and seeing my team thrive and
mhm.
succeed. And to be fair, come up with much better ideas that
Yeah.
we have, but just to see them thrive and lean on each other, create just different and new tactics than I've ever seen. I'll share with you, I recently arriving here in this new position, wanted to launch something like swarms, is what we called it. But
Yeah.
swarms, our leaders go out, they round on a patient, employee, or they will do an environment of care assessment. We come back,
Mhm,
brief together by exception, what went well, what didn't. So when I arrived here, I wanted to do something similar. So we all were
Mhm.
rounding together. And my chief nurse officer, Julie Nunley, actually took the idea, created something even better, and we're now
Yeah.
week 3 of execution. And again, it was much better than what I had
Um,
thought of, had envisioned. And I think that's just the power of trusting in your leadership team,
mhm.
allowing that autonomy. And as leaders, I mean, I'm just, they just knock my socks off, is what I'll say.
Yeah. It's so funny. It's like the thing that came to mind for me is I planted a seed and now you watched it grow, right? Because somebody else took it and ran the rest of the way. And I think that's one of the things too is you could have come in, Gina, and said, this is the way we do it. Here's the structure, here's what we do, here are the rules, here's the, standard work, all that stuff, right? Here's the schedule that works, everything else. While everything would have been true, that all that stuff worked, it didn't work in the space that you're in now. It worked at a different time and place. So when we pull these concepts and ideas in, to your point, we can't be attached to how it plays out, or this is the way we always did it, which can be really challenging for some leaders. But I love that you planted a seed and someone goes, oh, let me run with that seed. I'm gonna do all these great things. And then we're creating the space for people to be creative when we're empowering people and we're going, you know what, here's a starting place. What are your thoughts? So I love that. I love it. Um, so you said there's 3.
There's 3.
So
And
so who's the then this is the top 3 I can imagine the ones that we start with because we could probably do several weeks to
yeah,
where you identify here are all the 50 leaders that impacted me. So who's on your mind about number 3?
so I did reflect again. So Quint Studer, really that organizational change lead
Yeah.
initiative expert. And then you had Jill Ragsdale, again, creating that confidence, that trust environment. The number 3 is Dr. Ravi Chari. So Dr. Ravi
Wow.
Chari, he actually was working at Vanderbilt, transplant surgeon, just an extraordinary gentleman, then goes on and goes into administration. And whenever I served under his leadership, it's a different things that you appreciate about different leaders, but with Ryan,
Mhm.
I would say it was all about, he was so data driven, empirical research driven, that I loved his structure. I loved his grit. I loved
Mm.
the clarity. And I do believe he brought out just the best in all of us, because he also had extraordinarily high expectations. And so I just wanted to celebrate and recognize that leadership with just true grit.
It's interesting you say that because what you're talking about, I think about Grizzly Adams surviving in the wilderness, doing all that stuff. And so there's a balance, if you will, between true grit and everything else. And what I appreciate is that you're able to look across leaders that influenced you and be able to highlight the stuff that works to where what can I incorporate into me as a leader, right? And it's almost like this recipe that you may start off with I'm going to just make stuff up right now, the Nestle's Toll House cookie recipe, right? And all of a sudden you're going to start out that with the base recipe, and then you're going to add little things that make it your recipe. So it feels like you've taken from Quint and you've taken from Jill Ragsdale and you've taken from the trauma surgeon, because I'm not familiar with him. And you mixed it all together to be Gina Temple, the leader that shows up as you are today.
And I feel like I'm continuing to evolve.
You're human and you have a growth mindset. And so yes.
But I think it does go back to the leader that we need to be for the organization at the time we're there as well. So I
Yeah.
know, coming into this role, you and I were talking about it. Um, I right now am really engaged at building my team. I've got
Mhm.
vacancies right now on my executive leadership team because this team did not exist before. So
Mhm.
and so it's a new day. And so really trying to bring on like-minded people that have experienced proven results, because the hospital that I'm at now, I mean, we're over 300 beds,
Mhm.
complementary hospital of the future as well. That's 72 beds. So
Mhm.
that's a big scope. And so
Yeah.
just really, again, trying to bring on folks that, first of all, Quint would say has that moral character, that servant leadership, transactional, transformational leadership characteristics. I'm looking for
Mhm.
that. And I would say, what Jill would say is you want to bring folks on at this point in time in your organization who are experienced, who you can give a goal and they'll just take it and run. And you believe in their autonomy and their ability to self-direct and self-motivate. And then what Dr. Ravi Chari, and again, he was a transplant surgeon. What he would tell me would would be to, just make sure that you're using that process improvement uh,
Mhm.
perspective, that you're constantly gaining, moving on those incremental gains. And then using data wisely. Data should be actionable. And so he was so clever in making sure that we not only had dashboards, but it was actionable information that made us stronger. So yeah, those three folks, they continue.
Well, it's so funny you say that, because when I think about what's hitting me now with a transplant surgeon, they need to iterate on what's going on, right? Because you think about the success of transplants 10 years ago, even compared to the success of transplants and what they've learned now, it's night and day. How do we get something the body doesn't reject it? So it's almost like change management at the most basic human level. And so you do need to iterate. What's my learning? What's unexperienced here? What's all this stuff? And I love that mindset, because as leaders, we tend to be, this is the way that works. Does it? Did it? And Margie Haganey, one of my mentors, would say, what she quoted from somebody else, do you know the truth in this story? Right? Which means that you may have all this experience doing what you've been doing in all these other places, but what's the truth in the story sitting in front of you now? And that's where the differences come into play. So I freaking love it. Um, like I said, you have an open invitation to every single time. What I would love to do is um, tell people really quick the positions that you're looking for right now to fill your team. Are you open to that? I know I did not ask you about that. Because
Absolutely.
Gina would be awesome to work for. Okay. So, and work with.
So right now we have executive positions and one in human resources, one
Yes.
in operations, and the
Okay.
it is really focused on business development and strategic growth.
I love it. So literally, if this is a space that you're in, or you know somebody else, I'm going to put the reach out information for Gina's LinkedIn so that you can reach out to her. But Judy, you're an amazing leader, and I've told you this before, and humble and everything else. And I think you've taken what you've learned along the way from the three leaders you highlighted today, as well as the other lessons. And to your point, you're always open to feedback. And you're always open to going, okay, what's a little bit better look like? What can I do differently? Oh my gosh, maybe I didn't see that before. But it's that joy, positive. You don't beat yourself up about it. You're like, oh my gosh, I now know this that I didn't know before. I wasn't seeing this. And I think those are great learnings. When you talk about Quint talking about leading from the front isn't leaving your people in the dust, but leading from the front to me is walking the talk, role modeling for people what leadership looks like, that's inclusive and transparent and vulnerable and respectful and all the stuff. So thank you. My question for you is, as we wrap up for today, what are one or two things that you want people to walk away with around this topic on leadership?
Um, You know, what we do is so tough. And I think as a leader, just making sure that that emotional intelligence piece is there, because it's just being aware and open,
Hmm.
really, I think, is very important. And I know that's what I really appreciated about the three leaders that we discussed today.
Hmm.
They were just very self-aware. They were constantly self-diagnosing, but also they were looking and searching for those other hidden leaders or leaders with hidden abilities. And
Hmm.
they just brought out the best in folks. So I would just say for the leaders that may be watching this, reflecting on my path and the folks who've really impacted me, I would just challenge you, be emotionally intelligent, be aware, and be the inspiration for others.
I love that. It's interesting when you were talking about it, because I was thinking about um, the awareness piece is who is in your tribe, right? On your personal board, however you want to describe it, that you've set the intention that you want feedback, that you are on a learning journey. You want to show up in this way. We don't always see how what we're doing lands. We don't always see, because the brain is wired to see what it expects to see,
Yeah.
right? Which when we write a paper, when we write an email, when we do anything like that, we don't catch mistakes the way somebody else will look at it and go, oh my God, boom, 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 right? Because our brain goes, oh, this is what I expect to see. This is how I expect it to read. And so we don't see that stuff. So I encourage people, and it's scary, by the way. I'm going to be completely honest with you. When you step in and you set it up and you want feedback, it's scary to get feedback. But here's the thing I'll say is that you don't have to take it. It's not personal. Don't take it personally. You don't have to accept in a way of making the change on all the feedback that you hear, because you'd be like this crazy thing that goes around. So, but get it, and then sit and ask yourself, will this serve me? Will this help me move forward? Do I have an awareness now of something I didn't before? Because while that might have not been my intention, are there tweaks I can make? But the thing I would say is set it up to ask for it. Get people that are around you that you're going to go, hey, I just had this meeting. What are your thoughts? That you can help guide you and get those points of feedback. So that's what I would say.
Very fortunate, again, being here in this position now for a little over 3 months. And my immediate supervisor is Peter Powers. And that's one of the things that I've already introduced, and just making sure that during our monthly one-on-ones that I'm getting that feedback.
Yeah.
And, recently after a meeting even, I I thought that maybe I was a little bit too forceful
Mm-hmm.
in a group meeting, and I actually called Peter and I said, I want immediate feedback.
Yeah.
And he said, he just real time. He said, Gina, what came across was clarity, passion, and you were very clear on what you wanted. He
Mm-hmm.
said it really came across as very objective,
Mm-hmm.
and the desire was really linked to our mission. We're a
Mm-hmm.
faith-based, not-for-profit
Mm-hmm.
organization. And he said, I wouldn't change a thing. And
Yeah.
a peace. And even if it hadn't been, maybe it had been a different message that I received,
Mm-hmm.
peace and the closure that, Peter provided to me as a leader really helped me to move on with my day. Even sometimes
Mm-hmm.
as leaders, you need to unpackage something and you need to go, go, go. So,
Uh-huh.
just having that sounding board, he's available to me. He's very approachable. To your point, you've got to have that as a leader. You just have to have it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm blessed.
Yeah. I love it. And I think part of it, what you're going to do is because you've set the expectation, what it also allows is Peter's going to be in a position to start observing, because he knows Gina wants feedback.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
So all of a sudden, it's not like, what feedback do you have for me? And they're like, well, you did fine. So he knows now to expect it. And so you put people on alert, and they're going to be looking for those things. Where if you don't have the conversation, they're not necessarily doing that.
You're right.
Yeah.
As a leader, I mean, we just never stop growing. And I know a lot of folks, I'm also humbled because, I'm a CEO. Some folks may look at the CEO position and say, they never want feedback, or they've made it. Why would they want to change?
Yeah.
And so I'm just here to say to everyone, it doesn't matter if you're, a president, CEO, vice president, if you're over one hospital, 40 hospitals,
Mhm.
um, the things that got us to these positions are what keep us sharp, that we
Mhm.
are not satisfied with the status quo. And a lot of that goes back to, I want the best for my patients, I want the best for my employees, and I want the best for my physician partners. That
Mhm.
will never change, and it is relentless. And I love what I do. I'm so blessed to be here.
So thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been Leadership Soundbites with Michelle and Gina Temple. And until next time, please like, share, subscribe.